How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another exciting video. And this video is going to be the first in a series where we're building a mobile application using Dart and Flutter. So essentially in this video, I'm just going to do an overview of the app we're going to be building, and then I'm also going to do some of the initial setup for getting Flutter configured on your operating system. And then in the following videos, we're going to do the actual coding of this application. So let's go ahead and get started with the overview. This right here is the app running on an Android emulator. And then I'm also, after this, going to show it running on the iOS emulator. That way you can rest assured that this runs on both Android and iOS. So let's go ahead and take a look at this app. So at the top has a simple app bar with some text. At the bottom we have the bottom app bar along with a button. And then essentially you can kind of imagine this as you click this button and it refreshes a newsfeed. So we get some posts and then we display those posts. Now, how this actually works is you click this, it makes an HTTP request to our backend server, and then our backend server gives us back some JSON data, which then we have to parse so that Dart and Flutter can utilize it, and then we use that data and display it in some cards, which we kind of list out. So let's go ahead and see how that works. So we click this, and then it refreshes our newsfeed. So then we get back this data, and then each piece of data has the title, the image, the content, and then the user that made the post. Now, there's not actually multiple users on this app, so our backend server just has a single API endpoint. We make a request to that endpoint, and then it just gives us back this data. And then this data is whatever we added basically through the admin. But you can sort of pretend that maybe this is an app that has multiple users, and essentially if it was a more complex app, maybe when you make this API request, the endpoint checks whether you're authorized to make that request, sees the user that made the request, looks through their friends list, retrieves the posts of the users in their friends list, and then kind of organizes it by date or something, and then sends back that data. So that's more realistically how it might work with a real, more complex application, but this right here is just very simple to help beginners get started with Flutter and Dart. So these are the different posts. So John went on some kind of cottage trip, and then Amanda went on a camping trip over the weekend. And also, don't judge the posts I made. It's supposed to, as closely as possible, simulate a newsfeed, but yeah, wasn't too creative with these. And then we have Kevin went on a hiking trip. And then, of course, I had to include one of these. Ashley, of course, went to the club last night and didn't remember much of what happened. So yeah, we've all got one of these people in our newsfeed, I'm sure. Although maybe a little bit less the past year. But had to make sure I include that as well, because we want to make sure this looks as realistic as possible. But here's one thing I can guarantee for sure, though, is that building this app is going to be much more fun than even Ashley had in the club last night. And I promise you that for sure, guys. So this right here is the app on the Android emulator, so kind of get an idea of what it looks like, how it's going to work. Now we're going to see this running on the iOS emulator as well. That way you can rest assured this also works on iOS as well. Now, before I go and show you guys this running on the iOS emulator, I just want to quickly kind of explain the backend server. So it is a Django backend server that's going to be running locally on our machine, but we're not going to be writing the code for this backend server. So I already wrote all the code and then I hosted it on GitHub. So I'm just going to kind of walk you guys through how you can clone the server on your own local machine and then how to configure it and get it up and running. So that way we can have a server running on our local machine, and then we can just have our Dart and Flutter application making requests to that server running locally. And then a lot of the times when you're making a mobile application, you will be doing things like making a backend server. So this way you can kind of simulate what it's like to have this sort of development environment where you're coding up your application or your mobile application, and then also where you can have your backend server all running locally on your machine, and then of course later host everything. So yeah, with that little aside, now let's go ahead and see this running on the iOS emulator as well. Alright, so I went ahead and ran my iOS emulator, and then here it is, the same application running on the iPhone X simulator as well. So we still have this kind of top app bar, the bottom app bar, and our button. And then when we click this button, it'll make our HTTP request to our Django backend server, and we'll retrieve our posts and display them, just like before. So let's make that request, and here we are. We see all of our posts. and they're all the exact same posts as before. So yeah, everything works on both Android and iOS, and then you can basically, when we're going through this application, you can simulate this in whichever emulator you want. Now, I'm going to be doing it in the Android emulator just because a lot of people are going to be using Windows and then they won't have things like the iOS simulator. So that's kind of the reason why I'm going to be mostly focusing on Android simulator. Although for you guys who have a Mac operating system, you can also simulate the application in the iOS simulator as well. So yeah, that's basically everything for the overview of the application. Now let's go ahead and see how we can get up and running with Flutter. Alright, so first we're going to set up Flutter on the Windows operating system. So just first thing you want to do is get Android Studio. So just search for Android Studio, click the link, and then go ahead and download that using the download button. And then you're just going to have to agree to this form, and then you can just go ahead and download it for Windows. I already went ahead and downloaded both Android Studio and Flutter. And then basically for Flutter, all you're going to do is go on Google, search for Flutter. So I'm going to show that in a second. And then just click on that link. And then from there, you're going to have those Get Started buttons. So just click on that. And then from there, click on Windows. And then from there, just click on that Flutter's Windows stable.zip file. And then that will download your Flutter zip folder. And then I already went ahead and did that, so I'm gonna go ahead and cancel that. Alright, so now let's go ahead and take a look at the next steps. So first I'm gonna go ahead and set up Android Studio. So just double click on that installer for Android Studio that you downloaded. And then allow it to make changes. And then just kind of go through the setup wizard and make sure you have that Android virtual device checked off. So it should be checked by default. And then put your location where you want it to be installed, and then just go ahead and install. Alright, so then that's all completed. So now I'm gonna go ahead and start up Android Studio. And then I'm gonna do not import settings, wait for that to get up and running. And then I'm not gonna send any data. And then just click next, and then gonna do the standard install. Gonna use dark theme, except we won't be writing any code with Android Studio. We'll be using VS Code instead. So yeah, just kind of go through this, click finish, and then here we see that unable to install, and then your CPU does not support VTX. So in this case, I was running this in a virtual machine, and then all I had to do was kind of restart the virtual machine with that setting configured. So that's just kind of one requirement, you need to have that. And then I went ahead, did the configure AVD manager. This is what kind of opens up where your virtual devices are. And now I'm just going to kind of walk through getting that kind of up and running. So here we have that HAXM not installed. So if you see that, make sure you install it. So then after that gets installed, then we're going to go ahead and set up our emulator. Alright, so that should successfully install, and then if it doesn't, then you're probably going to have to do some troubleshooting, so hopefully this step doesn't stump you. So I'm going to create a new virtual device. And then in my case, I'm going to create the Nexus S5 virtual device. So just click that and then click next. Then you're going to have to download one of these releases or Android platforms. So I went ahead and did the latest. So that's Android R. So I'll just let that go ahead and install. And then once it's installed, then you can just select the one you downloaded. So that's the API level 30 I did. And then just went ahead and kept the default name and then clicked finish, and then my virtual device was set up. And then from there, you can just click that little play button, and then that should launch your emulator. Now in this case, I was having some issues with it just because I was recording plus in a virtual machine, so it's very demanding on the system requirements, but it should work. And then from there, just create a new project. That way you can just kind of download, install some of the Android things that you need. So I just did a default project, clicked finish once that was all set up. And then from there, you're going to create a project, and it'll just download a bunch of requirements. And so yeah, all the Gradle stuff will get set up. And yeah, so Android at this point is basically set up. You just have to make sure you download everything needed. And then the next step is setting up Flutter. So I went ahead and created a new folder inside of my C drive, and I called it Workspace. And basically I'm just creating a folder where I'm going to place that zip file. So I want to place it in Workspace, and then in a folder called Flutter. So that's where I put it, and that's where I'm going to unzip it. And then it doesn't really matter where you put this. This is just where I decided to place this zip file and extract the zip file. So I just went ahead, extracted it in there. And then after that's unzipped, then I just kind of went ahead and renamed some things and made sure that the Flutter folder that got unzipped was inside of Workspace Flutter. So I'll go ahead and show you that in a sec. So I actually ended up renaming this one, but inside of this one is actually the folder Flutter, so I kind of went ahead and kind of reconfigured things a little bit. So I just renamed this one to some temporary name so that I could move the folder inside of there into my Flutter folder, and then I just deleted that one because it's empty now. Alright, so now basically that Flutter folder is in Workspace, Flutter, Flutter. And then in there, there's a bin folder. And then in this bin folder, you have the Flutter application that you can run. And then that's kind of what we need. So in order to actually be able to run Flutter from our command line, we have to configure the path variable. So you're going to want to search for control panel. And then in control panel, you're going to click on user accounts. And then you're going to click on user accounts again. And then from there, you're going to have a button for change my environment variables. And then from there, you can change your path. So right now, if you were to run Flutter from the command line, it's not recognized as an internal command. So that's something that we have to set up. In order to get that to happen, we have to adjust this path variable. So I added a new path. And basically, that's just the path to that bin folder. So in my case, it was workspace/flutter/flutter/bin. So you just want to go ahead and put your path inside of there. But we are still not able to run it from the command line. So something you're going to want to do is search for git bash and go ahead and download and install that. So that's what I'm doing here. So you're going to click on get started. And then git bash is basically what's going to let you kind of have a terminal in Windows. So I just went ahead, downloaded that, and then just waiting for that to get downloaded. And then just went ahead and ran the installer. And then you're just going to kind of click next a bunch of times. I just left everything as default. So after clicking next a bunch of times, you're going to go ahead and install it. And then from there, you're going to have git bash on your Windows system. So I went ahead and just launched it straight away. So there we are. There's the terminal. And then I just kind of deleted the installer since I don't need that anymore. And then you can either do git cmd or you can do the git bash terminal. I recommend the git bash terminal. It's a little bit better. Although if you want to have more of a command line interface, git cmd would give you something like this. So it looks very similar to your normal cmd. And then from here, you can also run the Flutter command. So now when I type Flutter, because I have the path variable set, it works in git cmd, but I prefer using git bash, so I'm going to use that. And then if you run the Flutter command in here, you're also going to see that it gives you some output now. So it's no longer a command that's not found because we set up that path variable. So now I'm going to go ahead and navigate into Workspace, Flutter. So here's that folder. And then I'm going to make a new directory projects. And then I'm going to navigate into that. And that's where I'm going to kind of make a test project. So when I first ran it, I tried to make one called test, but you can't do that, so make sure to call it something else. So I called it my_app. So you just do Flutter, create, and then the name of the app, and then that'll create you a Flutter project. And then from there, you can navigate into that new folder that's created, which is your Flutter project. So I navigated into my_app because that's what I called it. And then from there, you can run Flutter Doctor. That'll show you some stuff that you still need. So in this case, I need the Android licenses. So it actually shows you what command you have to run. So Flutter Doctor -- Android -- licenses. So just go ahead and run that command. So Flutter Doctor Android licenses. And then basically you're gonna click yes to a bunch of different things. And then after you click yes to a bunch of things, then that's all set up and you're done from there. And you should be good to go. So there it is. Everything's up and running. And then you would just do Flutter run while having your emulator open. And then that would run your app. All right, so now let's go ahead and see how we can get this all set up on a Mac operating system as well. So for the Mac, you're going to need Android Studio, and you're also going to need Xcode. Those are two of the things we need to have Flutter working with both Android and iOS. So as for the Android stuff, it's very, very similar to the Windows setup. So you're just going to search for Android Studio. You're going to click on the link, and then you're just going to download it. And then the download's very straightforward. You're just going to get that DMG, which then you go ahead and double click and then just drag Android Studio to your applications folder. So it's the same as anything else you would really download. Then from there, you're going to have Android Studio. So where is it? So yeah, you're going to have Android Studio. You're going to go configure and then ABD manager. And then from there, you just kind of configure your device the exact same as on the Windows setup. So just create new virtual device. I created a Nexus 5X with API 28. You can use API 30, whatever you want. In this case, I have this one set up. And then from there, you can just kind of run it. And then another thing you might have to do is create a project and then just have Android Studio download a bunch of things. And then just like on the Windows setup, once you create your Flutter project, you'll navigate into it, and then you're going to have to run Flutter Doctor -- Android -- licenses. So it's the same sort of thing. And then I'm just going to show that command again once we kind of go through the Flutter setup for the Mac. So next thing we want to do is just Google Flutter, click on the website, so flutter.dev. And then from there, just click the Get Started button, either the one on the navbar or the one here, doesn't matter. Then click on macOS. And then from there, you're just going to click this, which is going to download the zip file, which then you're going to put somewhere where you're going to extract it. And then we're going to set up the path variable. So I'm going to show all of that. So right now I have my terminal open. So on the left, I'm just kind of navigated inside of my home directory. And then on the right one, I'm navigated inside of a directory where I have that Flutter folder. So basically, I have a projects folder. That's where I kind of put Flutter projects. And then I have this one here, which is the Flutter folder. And then inside of here, I have that bin folder. And then in that bin folder, of course, we also have the Flutter application, which we can run. Now, in order to actually be able to do something like type Flutter and then use commands, we have to also configure the path variable. So I'm going to show that first. So inside of your home directory, so inside of this terminal here where I'm in my home directory, what you're going to want to do is write nano, and then you're going to open bash_profile. This is going to be .bash_profile. You're going to click enter, and then at the bottom, you're going to write this. So it's going to be export path equals, and then you're going to put in the path to that bin folder. So a way you can do that is when you're inside of that bin folder, you can do pwd. Then that will give you the path. So that's this path right here. In my case, you would put whatever your path is. And then you'd put that in here. And then you do colon and then $path. And that would set up your path environment variable. So that way you can write something like Flutter. And then, write Flutter inside of your terminal, and you'd be able to actually use Flutter. Now, in my particular case, I'm not using bash, so this wouldn't actually work. So if you're in a similar situation, then you can kind of follow along with what I'm about to show. So I'm using iterm2, and then the default shell program that I'm using is Z shell instead of bash. So in my case, what I had to do in order to get it to work was nano.zprofile or zprofile, however you want to say it. And then inside of here is where you would do that configuration. So inside of .zprofile, I put export path equals that path to that bin folder, and then $path. So if you're using Z shell, then this is how you would do it. If you're using bash, then you can do it with the .bash profile. So with that, you can run Flutter commands now. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate back into my one folder where I have projects and the Flutter folder, and then I'm going to navigate into the projects folder. So this way I can demonstrate creating a Flutter project. So what we're going to do is Flutter create, and then the name of the Flutter project. So I can do something like my_app, let's say. I can click enter. That'll go ahead and create a Flutter project. So there we go, it's all done. So now I can actually navigate into here. And then I have all the files that were created with this Flutter project. So now to go back with what I was saying before, with when you're setting up Android, on here you're also going to have to do something like Flutter doctor and then Android licenses. So you're going to want to run this command to set up the Android licenses. And then that's pretty much the last step to kind of have Android working. And then basically the way it works is you would run your Android emulator. And then inside of your project, you would write Flutter run. So while your emulator is open, you run this command, and then that would run it on your Android emulator. Now let's kind of go through how we would do things with the iOS. So the iOS emulator. So first thing, you want to have Xcode, so just go into your, what is it called, App Store. Go into App Store, search for Xcode, and download that if you don't have it. And then once you get that downloaded, it's also going to ask you to install additional required components. And then basically you're going to want to do that as well, because you're going to need those additional components to get installed. And then once that's all finished, you're going to want to go into your terminal, and you're going to want to run the command sudo xcode build -license, and then this will set up the Xcode license for you. And then after that, you're basically good to go. You can open up Xcode, and then from there, you can go into Xcode, open developer tool, and then simulator. Use simulator, and then you can set up whatever simulator you want, or open simulator will show other ones you have. So if I go under this iOS 14.4, I have all of these different simulators that I can use. And in my case, I'm just using the iPhone X. Doesn't matter what you use, whatever you prefer. All right, so now that I have this emulator open, I'm just going to demonstrate how you'd actually run a Flutter project. So when we create a Flutter project, it'll actually create kind of a default project. And then if you run that, you'll see that default project. And then, of course, when you make your app, you're going to just delete to that code and then make your own project. But basically, once you're going to want to be inside of that directory. So I'm in projects and then my app. That's the app that was created. And then inside of here, I want to run Flutter run. All right, and there we are. So the application ended up launching, and now we see that default application. So it's a very simple one. Just says you have pushed the button this many times, and then when you click the button, it just increments. So that's basically the default app that you have when you create a Flutter project. And then, of course, we're going to replace this with our actual app that we want. And yeah, so that basically shows how you can run this. And sometimes you might have an issue where you can't run. And if you ever have it like fail to build, then what you're going to want to do is just run the command flutter clean. And then that'll just kind of clean things up and let you actually be able to run it. So that's kind of what you do in that sort of case. Also, I don't need this left terminal open, so I'll just close that. So yeah, and then the way that you would now quit out of this is you would just press Q on your terminal. So that now closes the application. And then from here, I can click on my simulator, go onto simulator, quit simulator. So that's the way that you would properly quit out of the simulator. So yeah, that's basically it. So that now shows you how to set up things on Android and on iOS. So basically, once again, on Android, you're going to want to go ahead and create your emulator, and then you're going to want to go ahead and create a project, and then that will kind of let you install some additional things. So in particular, you'll sometimes see where you have to install build tools, and then when you see that, make sure you install the build tools, and then you can basically, you're set up to go with Android. And then right now I showed everything that you need to do to get iOS working. So if you're using a Mac, you can kind of follow along with the project using whichever simulator you want. And then if you're on Windows, you're going to follow along with the Android emulator. So yeah, that'll be everything in this video. So we covered the application we'll be building. I showed you how to set up Flutter, whether you're using a Windows operating system or Mac OS. And then in the next video, we're going to go ahead and kind of get started with coding this mobile application. So that'll be everything for this video. If you guys enjoyed what you saw, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to leave this video a like and then subscribe to the channel if you want to kind of follow along and see when I upload videos. Also, click that bell icon if you want to receive notifications. Also, there's some links in the description if you want to like the Facebook page and the Facebook group. That way, if you have any kind of questions that are development related or have something to do with a project that I've posted, then you can go ahead and message me personally and I will get back to you. So yeah, that'll be everything, and I'll see you guys in the next video.